Here.
Kate Payne.
Here.
Richard Dane.
Here.
Mary French. Stephanie Garner.
Here.
Lance Gritters. David Huser.
Here.
Kathy Olson.
Here.
Heidi Solheim.
Thank you. The next item is the approval of the agenda. Do I hear a
Move approval?
motion?
Second.
Before we vote, I've got one minor correction. Lance, the header on the minutes, never mind. We'll do the minutes when we do the minutes and not the agenda. Those in favor of approving the agenda as printed, say aye. Yes.
Aye.
Whatever.
Yes.
And
Yes.
those
Aye.
opposed, no. The agenda is approved. Now let's go to the minutes. There is a minor correction, and that's the header on the sheets reads August 1st. It'd be easy to correct, but that way we don't deliver it to council.
Okay.
Having said that, the minutes as presented,
Move approval.
you got it?
It was September 5th, is that what you're saying?
No, it should be September 5th.
Yeah, that's what our
Screen, it says September
If you
5th.
go to
The header on,
three.
yeah, the header on page 2 and 3
Oh,
reads
okay.
August 1.
Oh, yeah.
it's a minor
Yep,
piece.
we'll get that corrected.
Okay, the minutes, then, we have a motion and a second. Anything further? Those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no. And the minutes of the September 5th meeting are approved. First item on the, well, we don't have a public hearing tonight. First item on the agenda is regular business, and it's a review and discussion of plat of survey for the properties located at 2103 East Bremer Avenue. What do we have here?
Yeah, so this is the location of UEA. Currently, there are 4 lots, and they are looking to do some expansion work on this on these 2 lots. So upon doing that, staff asked them to combine some of the lots because some of the new work would have crossed existing property lines. So they have submitted a plat of survey. So they'll be taking the 4 lots into 2 parcels, OO and parcel PP. As you can see, the parcel PP is the northern parcel, and then parcel OO is the southern parcel. The staff would recommend recommending approval for the plat of survey.
Okay. Any questions, comments, discussion?
So that piece that is adjacent to OO but isn't labeled, is not part of this property? This one right here.
To make her concrete and excavating.
Okay. So that's not part of the property that we're talking about. Everything in the dark lines is already part of the
Correct, yes.
Kennewaw property.
Any other comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the plat of survey for the properties located at 2103 East Bremer Avenue to the City Council.
Second?
Any further discussion? Those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no. And the motion is carried. Let's go to item number 2, review and discuss the plat of survey for the properties located at 3401 East Bremer Avenue. Isaac, again, did you fill us in?
Yes, so currently this is the location of the, I believe it's called Star Motel in El Sol. And then the proposed lot 2 is currently just an empty lot. There's no development on that lot currently. It's currently 3 lots. We believe that if you pull up the current aerial, you can kind of see that there's two larger pieces, and then there's a little strip in between them. It was staff's understanding that that was an easement, that it's actually its own parcel. So they're getting rid of, per se, that little easement area, and they're kind of realigning this so that El Sol will have its own lot, and the Star Motel will have its own lot, and then the empty lot will be able to be sold or developed however the owner sees fit in the future. To staff's knowledge, there's not any current plans for development or sale, but I think that that's the idea for the owner. So let me pull this back up. So this will just be realigning where the property lines are. You can see that there will be a utility easement on the western edge of Lot 2 and on the eastern edge of Lot 1. And then it kind of goes to the northern of Lot 3 as well. There is an existing sewer line that will run through that utility easement that Lot 3 hooks up to, and then it's intention that Lot 2 would be able to hook onto that as well. Staff's recommendation is to approve the plat of survey.
Lance, what's the function of the lot that is to the west of Lot 3? It's a narrow lot,
Yeah.
30 feet wide.
Is that where the easement was?
Yeah, we believe that it used to be an easement. We're not entirely sure when it went from an easement to its own lot. But as they realign these property lines, that will morph into Lot 1, the proposed Lot 1. So,
That narrow strip disappears.
correct, yep.
Okay.
What's the setback behind El Sol?
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Does that meet our present?
Let me pull up the current aerial. It may not, but in this case, it would fall under a grandfathered in type use, so they'd be allowed to operate. If it were to burn or something of that nature, where at least 50% of it is destroyed, then they would have to come into compliance with the existing code. But
That's why I'm wondering, do we want to take care of it now? You know, that's, why are we approving something, that, it isn't up to code right now, and make him turn around and move that back at least to whatever I'm trying to think what that would be.
It would be 20 feet.
20, isn't it?
it'd be 20 or 25. I have to look to be certain.
I don't know, I'm just, I hate to, I hate to always have to come back and do something because something else happened, that's the only thing I'd say.
That makes perfect sense.
It looks like it's just right on the back side of it. Of course, that was probably done back in the county days. But, yeah, it would have been.
And that,
So what would be required to fix it?
You have to just put 20 feet.
Push the
more.
property line to the north?
Yeah, you just have to push the property line.
well, you end up adding 10 feet because you'd have 10 feet of easement and 10 feet of clean property.
Yeah, the staff, you besides the rest of the staff didn't even think about that at all, or?
It's staff's opinion that as it sits currently, it sits along that property line, so it's already would be considered a legal non-conforming use. So we didn't see it as necessarily a hurdle to what they're trying to do. However, we can convey the commission's thoughts to the surveyor, if that's something that the commission wants to do.
Yeah, that's what I would recommend, but I just hate to see something, I don't want to say it's going to burn down or anything, but things do happen, so I just thought, take care of it now when it's being, not have to rush into it sometime down the road.
What burden would that create for El Sol? They'd have to purchase an additional, 10 feet? Or is the easement?
Probably 20, but
Yeah, because the easement isn't on their property.
it makes perfect sense. I would be supportive, because it doesn't make sense if they go through a event and then to come and well, you're only 40% damaged, so you can or you can't, or you're 60%, so you can or you can't. Just clean it up. As long as we got the surveyors out there, they can set new pins and be done with it. It makes perfect sense. I think that should be our recommendation before we could approve it.
Let's go around. Any other comments?
How would that impact the current, or how would it impact the property and their usage?
Wouldn't impact, it looks like I'm going to assume there's 20 foot there.
From the back of the building?
So you'd have your setback, and you wouldn't be getting into anything. It appears that way.
Okay.
But in effect, isn't it that they'd maintain the status quo until that was done before they could get the approval?
Yeah, correct, yeah.
If we continue down this path. In other words, they continue operating and they just take this off the table.
Yeah, correct. If we go to them and and I relay what the commission recommendation is to move it back 20 feet, they could pull this and decide that they no longer want to pursue it, in which case it would operate as the 3 lots as they are today. Correct.
So I think it's a matter of how strongly we feel that we need to do that.
There'll always be, if you push it back to the north 10 or 20 feet, the easement then is on El Sol's property.
And from the looks of this aerial, that easement, not the aerial, the other plan, the easement would then be entirely on El Sol's property.
So I just don't understand if the building burns down, say, in more than 50% or whatever that number is. The setback is to the property line regardless of the easement. But it's never really, it's never really their space. It just seems a little weird.
No, they can't build on it.
Right.
Is that correct? Yeah.
You're forcing them to buy property that they can't build on because it has an easement.
And do we want to do that is the question. Yeah. What's your pleasure?
So if there was total loss of that property, we don't have an issue, because if they were to rebuild,
Anywhere
They
on
could-
that property.
right,
Correct. And the current property, as it sits along its western property line, it is still the 140 feet. So they'd be able to rebuild and meet setbacks. They would cut into the existing parking, but they would be able to fit another building onto that lot. So.
The problem occurs when there's a damage that exceeds 50%, they can't remodel it.
yeah.
Right.
They can't fix it because they're non-conforming, and that just doesn't seem to me to be reasonable for us to leave that in place. That we should fix that.
That way it's a non-issue.
And why revisit things as we so often do and have to come up with special provisional uses and everything else?
So is there a cost to El Sol?
Well, this is owned by the same, all of it.
It looked like it, yes.
Yeah, correct. All three
Also-
lots are currently owned by the same owner, yes.
So it would be their deciding to change the property line, and
Correct.
charge themselves $1 or whatever it takes to make the transaction.
The cost of a survey.
Correct, correct.
Some of this have to do with that sewer easement that they've been fighting about, city and Rich Schultz.
That is on this property. I don't want to say a whole lot because I don't want to reveal too much because we still are in.
You're still in, okay.
Yes.
But does that affect any of these easement lines?
The proposed easement line is where the existing sewer line is
Yeah.
running through, yes.
I'm sorry I brought it up. But I do think, it's better to do it now when it's, it's not an issue than to have something happen. I mean, there's been too many times where that.
You don't know exact measurement behind the building?
Looking from the aerial, I would guess that it probably does not meet current.
Yeah.
So, but as I said, as it currently sits along the western, like the southwestern edge of the property, it's 140 feet from the right-of-way line. That's what they're proposing for Lot 3. So if something were to happen to the building, they would be able to rebuild on this lot and meet current setbacks.
So the downside for the current owner is that you have to pay for a revised plat survey.
Correct.
The downside for El Sol is if they buy that corner property, they're buying more property that isn't really to their benefit because it's an easement, but it would protect them from having to rebuild the building if there was a loss that exceeded 50% and moving it and doing a whole reconstruct, they could renovate.
Correct.
If someone were to buy that parcel and use a lender is going to be far more comfortable with the elimination of the 50% issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, because as an
That's
appraiser, that was
probably
one of the things that they always ask. You know, if it's non-conforming, can it be rebuilt? So.
So what do we do as an action? Isaac, is there some desirable language that we ought to be putting in here so that it doesn't get all convoluted? It seems that we ought to be able to say this simply.
Well, there's really three actions. You could either table the issue and then we could bring it back to the owner who's submitting the application, ask them to redo it. And they can either, they can choose not to and bring it back next month, or they can pull it. Those are those three options. We could recommend approving it contingent upon them moving the proposed northern property line of Lot 3 20 feet to the north. Or we could recommend denying this, in which case it could still potentially go to council. It would just go with a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission. And then with that recommendation, staff would relay why this commission recommended denying it, and we would let the applicants know why as well. And then, again, they would have the choice to either take it to council, pull it, resubmit it, so forth.
It would seem that perhaps the best option is to table it and go back to the parties so that there can be some discussion and bring it back to that way they don't have to file again.
Okay.
I move we table it.
It's done. I don't think table needs a motion or a vote.
I defer to you.
I don't believe that we had a second last month when we tabled the code changes, so I'll just have it down as user motioned to table that issue.
Okay. Thank you. Item number 3. Review and recommend on ordinance amendment to the zoning chapter 100, sections 100.13 C-2 and 100.15 M-1. Staff is recommending changes in both districts to clarify that warehouses and buildings containing self-storage units should be in M1 and not C2. And we've had several discussions about this at the meetings, and Isaac, you want to add, you guys, we're going to go back and
Yes.
take a good look at this, and
Yep.
most of us had a chance to read through it.
Yep, absolutely. So last month, the bulk of the discussion centered around Section 6 in Section 100.13.02 and striking the entire section. So staff has gone back, and we're leaving in about the first half that talks about carpenter, cabinet shops, lumberyard, etc. And we're striking the storage warehouse or business and wholesale warehouse or business, but not including any manufacturing or fabricating for wholesaling operations. So we've stricken that as a allowable use in this district. However, we have put it under the special provisional uses. So the code would read as Section 2, we're now under Section 100.13.03, the special provisional uses. We would be adding in storage warehouses or business and wholesale warehouse or business. So any business where the primary use is storage warehouse or wholesale warehouse would be allowable in a C2 use via conditional use or special use permit. So special use permit, it would come before this board. This board would make a recommendation, and it would go on to the city council at the present moment to have final approval. So it would just give a little bit more. This commission would look at it, staff would look at it, and we could see whether or not we felt that this warehouse or the storage units would fit the area that it's being proposed to be put into. So, again, staff's recommendation is to recommend approval of the code changes.
Discussion.
Does that also deal with containers? I know that's become an issue in some communities where, where they have storage units that they can put those containers that they bring in by semi.
Like shipping containers.
Does that cover these two? Because I know that's become an issue in several communities that I've been reading.
Yeah, it would either fall under this or it would fall under an outdoor storage type use where then it may meet
So
different part of the code.
they'd have to stay in the M2 or M2. Wouldn't be able to go into the C2, right? Too.
And I wanted to clear up one more thing from the last meeting. I feel like we kind of got into talking about businesses where an incidental use to the primary business was storage. We're not talking about that in this instance. So we're not talking about a business where they sell like furniture or something, and then they have in the back of their store more furniture. We're not talking about not allowing those types of uses, because that's a use that's incidental to the primary use of the property. This is only referring to the primary use of the property will be for storage units or wholesale warehouse or business. So.
You may or may not be fully familiar with what I'm going to ask, but Bill has specifically looked at Two Guys Home Interior and used that as a example of what we can't allow, which I find to be very objectionable. And to me, their primary business is customer-driven and incidental warehousing. When our economic development person has sat there and specifically said, we can't let that occur, I don't know that I like the subjectivity. So do you know the property I'm talking about? Would you call that incidental? And frankly, I don't know why we would want to discourage perfectly legitimate business enterprises in this community.
I can't say that I'm super familiar with the business that you're speaking of, so I don't want to say something that would be inaccurate. However, I'm going to point back to, with it putting it under the special provisional use, it would require more oversight from staff, specifically from this commission, and then ultimately city council. So we're not banning it outright. It's more of just a little bit more stringent on where specifically we want these types of uses. And so, like I said, I don't want to comment on the property you're speaking of just because I'm not knowledgeable on that. But
it makes me very uncomfortable when I hear you. We automatically need to put that in special provisional use. Plain and simple, I would, based on that statement, vote against it because I don't think we want to be evaluating every business opportunity as a special this, special that. Way too much power going to a group rather than allowing expansion within the community. I can't agree with the special provisional use aspect.
So when you don't disagree, or when you're disagreeing with the special provision, so you're saying you don't want to even change it at all, you want to leave it in?
I would probably say we should leave it in. I mean, simply creating change to increase control doesn't make sense. If there's not a problem, don't fix it.
Isn't that kind of the point of planning?
I don't consider it that planning.
And zoning?
It's already covered under the C2 business use.
But there are different types of businesses. I mean, this is really about warehousing, like if you had a giant Amazon warehouse.
The property in question isn't a giant warehouse.
Well, no, Two Guys isn't, but...
And yet, that's
I would
one that
argue-
our economic development person has said we can't have.
I think that that's hearsay in this conversation. Because...
He said it in this commission.
Well, I don't remember him saying specifically that a thing like Two Guys wouldn't be allowed, because I think that the way they wrote the description is actually saying that if there's a retail outlet, and that's the prime business, that even if it has a warehouse attached to it, which is what Two Guys is, that would be allowed.
Under special provisional use.
That functions like a furniture store, where they're storing their material that they're selling to the public as a retail.
And they get it in.
Size may matter here, I think that is really the point. That, and I think you said specifically that like a furniture store wouldn't be disallowed.
yeah, because, and again, I want to reiterate that I'm not familiar with the property that you're talking about, so I don't want to specifically speak about them, but every business has some sort of storage component to it. What it's storing whatever they're selling. We're more specifically talking about selling a unit for people to come in and store their things into. That's the type of thing where the primary use of the building is storage, not, a business where they're selling something else and then incidental to that, they're storing what they would be selling.
Right, so I think that what you're saying is that the revisions to this allow a business that is there to be a retail business but has a storage component without it being provisional.
Right.
I'll flip on this one for you, but that whole issue out there on 10th was the semis getting in and out, you
Right.
know, and that was the problem, that people were getting upset because you had professional offices, and then they had that, what do you want to call, warehouse with the retail, and the semis getting in there and then
Sure.
getting out, and so I think that's the other issue you deal with in something like this.
But I don't think this is saying that that kind of business would go to provisional use here.
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm going to flip on you and say, I don't think there should maybe be any type of a storage unit, because when you got a frontage road there that can't handle semis, should we really put there? And I think the first time this came up, we talked about limiting it to size of a warehouse too, but I don't remember details of that. It was just discussion. So I'm just giving you another thought process in there, but I don't know which way I really am, but there's issues both ways, I know where you're coming from, and I know where the people out there that have professional offices had a big concern, because of that storage or that warehouse and semis bringing things in.
The other piece of this is number 12, that we keep allowing to be on there. I don't believe that this commission, let me restate, this commission handled a very lengthy evaluation of multifamily properties, determined that it is commercial and is very being that a C2 property of greater than 12 units was appropriate for use and as multifamily. The reality is we don't have in this community a apartment complex with the amenities that'll draw people to the community. And if we're going to exclude that for the sole purpose, which Bill said 2 months ago, that he wanted to be able to evaluate their site plans and control what occurs, I don't believe that is the purpose of planning. And I don't believe that that's legitimate. I don't think 12 should be taken out. And the presumption that you can always build C2, in a C2 you can, as long as there's retail beneath the apartments, it's appropriate. We've already got a lot of strip mall in this community with open storefronts, and it's not going to happen. So we're going to hinder growth if we take this out. There are very few properties large enough, and when we went with 12 units or greater, I think that was fair and reasonable, and I can't support taking out 12, considering the amount of work this commission did 2-3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago.
So just kind of go, since Bill isn't here, I think Bill's concern with this is that we have created a high-density residential district. And with that district, if someone were to come in and build a high-density apartment unit, they would be subject to submitting a site plan. Those types of things would be making sure that, setbacks, they have sufficient parking, stormwater, that type of thing. So I think that's staff's opinion, is that's why we looked to strike this from this part of the code. However, However, if this commission doesn't feel comfortable with striking that, staff would still recommend that we recommend approval of this contingent upon we leave section 12 in there. So, and if that's something that the commission feels strongly about, staff will respect that, and when it's brought to council, it'll be with section 12 remaining in the code.
What's your pleasure?
We can always leave it in, and if we start to see a problem with it, then we can change it, you know. I don't know that it's an issue, but
I can support that. Leave 12.
What was the motivation for taking it out?
Like I said, with creating a new high-density residential district, staff felt that we would want, if somebody wanted to come in and build a high-density apartment unit or something of that nature, we would want them to be in that district because that would require them to submit a site plan, where if it's in a C2, it wouldn't necessarily require them to submit a site plan.
And because it's a residential use, that would provide a safe environment for the residents of that 12-unit property. I'm okay with it. I wasn't here for all of that discussion in the past, but in my world, you look at multifamily and its use is residential, and so therefore it should be in a residential setting, and it's used as a buffer from a commercial into a residential setting, into single family.
But if you look at the section 113.01.3 there, defines it as commercial slash residential use above the first floor. So do we have a mixed message here? We'd be saying 12 units above the first floor, right?
Well, I would say that the last sentence in that multifamily dwelling unit proposal shall be subject to the permitted use guidelines. I believe that would allow something, a multifamily type, a high-density apartment that we're kind of discussing. I believe that the way that's written, it would allow that to be the sole use of a property.
And that's why the 12 units or greater were put in.
Correct.
Because we have commercial properties throughout the community that work perfectly for multifamily, that are just a continuation of, and the thing we didn't want to do was lose commercial property to just a duplex. So that was why we went with 12 or greater.
From when I read this, the 12 item would, if it weren't stricken, it would allow residential. It implies, and I would say that this isn't super clear, it implies that you could build a residential complex of 12 or greater units, regardless of whether it had commercial
Right.
buildings underneath it.
Correct.
And therefore, it's inconsistent with item 3 up above. And I guess if item 12 were revised and said multifamily dwellings containing 12 units or greater above the first floor, then it would be consistent with the thing above,
Right.
and I wouldn't have trouble leaving it.
Yes.
But the way it's written here, I think it's inconsistent with what's above and confusing.
Yeah.
you limit it to how many stories, so then you'd have to be, because I think on a residential multifamily, isn't there a,
48-foot max.
what's that?
There's a 48-foot max.
Yeah, so,
To height.
yeah, so you'd have to be, might, to put 3 on, depending on what size they are.
Big building. You can put 8 feet in a hurry.
Well, the other piece there is 12 or more units above the first floor does not preclude building, we'll say 12 on a 36-unit apartment without commercial. Is that what you're saying, or?
I'm just saying it implies that you can have residential unassociated with a first floor commercial,
Yeah.
because this is about a commercial district. And
Well, you are correct. That was the intent when we changed it several years ago.
But I also remember when we changed some of that stuff several years ago, the idea was that we were trying to clean up those residential designations so that they didn't overlap, so that R1 was R1, R2 was only R2, and it didn't allow R1, or however that meshes together. And it seems a little weird to me that to put anything in a commercial district that is solely a at-grade residential facility without a commercial building, retail below it of some sort, doesn't make sense to me in a commercial district, especially when we have that high-density residential designation. So,
Because without the retail, it functions as residential.
yeah, just totally residential. And I don't think that that's desirable zoning activity in this kind of district.
Well, you go down, and we're not a Cedar Falls, but you go down to State Street and First Street, and you got units, you got retail, and they can't, those things fill up as fast as they've been building them.
Yeah.
So, I think
But
that's...
there's a density issue there that's making that successful.
Yeah,
That's
no,
not
but I mean-
South 4th Street.
Yeah, no, I understand. But you're talking C2, so, it could be out, it could be just off of downtown here, too.
But I think you'd still want retail on the first floor.
No, yeah, no, those are those last
Yeah.
multi-use,
And that's what's driving all that is, I don't know what they're going to put in all this.
I don't know where they park them all. That's the biggest thing that we have down there right now is, parking spaces for them all. That's the bigger problem than anything else.
That's,
All the millennials want to live down there and downtown. There's not enough parking.
yep, well, parking problems come with density. It's part of the deal.
I don't know how this gets resolved, but I would agree with Kate that item 3 above and 12 are inconsistent. And a fix to that would be, as you suggested, that in point 12, that it is above the first floor.
Yes.
That makes sense to me.
Is that a motion?
There's a motion.
I second that motion.
Okay, now we're talking about modifying, not
6.
approving the whole thing, but we're talking about one piece of it, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor, say yes.
Hold on, before we vote, I want to make sure that I've got the motion
You better say
correct.
that one.
Yep.
You better write that one down.
Yep. So I don't want to stop us from going through, but I just want to make sure that, so if you could repeat the motion, specific as possible.
Okay, the motion would be that item 12 under section 100.13.02 be amended to read, I would scratch the residential and just make it multifamily dwelling which contains 12 units or greater above the first floor.
Okay.
First floor retail.
Yeah,
First
or
floor
commercial.
retail, yeah,
Right.
or commercial.
All right.
Yeah, let's repeat it back one more time.
All right, so the motion is to leave section 12 in as read as multifamily dwelling which contains 12 units or greater above first floor retail or commercial.
Correct.
Okay.
And that just gets added to the motion that is in our agenda.
Yes.
Okay. So, okay, yep.
And we struck the word residential at the beginning
Correct.
of the thing, okay.
So should we have the motion be the move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the ordinance amendment to the zoning chapter, sections 100.13 and 100.15 to the city council, contingent upon these changes as stated, with striking the residential from section 12, then adding the above first floor retail or commercial?
I think it's simply as modified.
Okay. As modified.
Because-
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All righty. So
Okay.
Millennials and boomers.
Now, let's make sure we got all the pieces of this, though, because we're going to live with this. So what else do we need to be looking at here? Is there anything else?
So I think we're good with 12, with striking residential, keeping the rest of it, and adding above first floor retail or commercial. And then with 6, still the motion is to strike storage, warehouse, or business through the rest of that section. And then under section 100.13.03, special provisional use, adding the storage, warehouse, or business and wholesale warehouse or business to that section. And then,
Can you give me an example of how that might play out? That would come to us, what would be the circumstances where that would come to us as a request for a special provisional use?
So if somebody came and said that they have a piece of property that is currently zoned C2 and they would like to put mini storage units on that property, we would require them to fill out a special use permit application. It would go through our office. We would make sure that everything on that particular application they've submitted to us. We would bring that to this commission. You would review it. You would vote to recommend it or deny it, at which point it will go to city council currently.
And what would be grounds for denial?
If we felt that it didn't fit in the use or the area that they're requesting it. So, I mean, I apologize that I don't really have a good way, but it's if we have concerns about, if
Traffic.
it's traffic
Could be,
or
Okay.
Trucks.
Yeah.
and traffic and,
Water management.
Bill used another example last month. If there was a property that had a retail business at the front and there was a vacant section at the back that lent itself to maybe
Right, we
mini
talked about that,
storage.
like walkers.
Yeah, yeah. That might be a provisional use then.
Okay.
Because it would, it would be at the back, it wouldn't be at the front of a retail development.
like Krieger's, there's the storage units behind Krieger out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
I thought there was code that defined special provisional use a bit more specifically than that. Is that not, am I remembering that incorrectly?
yeah, we have code specific to special use permit.
Yeah.
So, and they would have to obviously follow everything under that code, but just kind of a rough roadmap to the process.
Because it's been a long time since I've looked at it, but I don't remember anything in the code that, it gives examples of things and tries to define it a bit more, but I don't remember anything in there that would come close to sounding like storage units. Now, I could be wrong, I haven't looked at it, but more recently. Is that relevant to this discussion at all?
Well, a special use permit is more, it's saying that we're going to allow this use on a property where it doesn't have like outright use for it. So there's other uses in the C2 that they can just, if they come in and say, I have a property that's zone C2, I want to put a restaurant on it, they don't have to go through, it's an outright use for that property. So we're just saying that in this case, it's a use that it may be appropriate in some situations, it may not be appropriate in other situations. So we're going to make them get a special provisional use. It comes through this commission, city council, et cetera. So.
There's other places that special provisional use is used, you know, I mean, like, is there, it's like clinics or something, or?
Yeah.
Churches.
Churches, schools,
So there's a lot
hospitals.
of different things
Yeah,
where
yeah.
the special provisional use is
Right.
used, so I mean, that's
Yeah.
just the rule that you use to allow for it, so.
Yeah,
And
no, I know that, yeah. I just thought it was more defined, but maybe not.
I don't think so.
Okay.
There's a few references to provisional uses in various sections all the way through the code.
Okay.
In different zones.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Okay, are you ready for the vote? Still roll call.
All right. Kathy Olson,
Yes.
Dave Huser,
Yes.
Stephanie Garner,
Yes.
Richard Dane,
No.
Kate Payne,
Yes.
Hank Bagelman.
Yes. The motion is carried and it's 5-1.
Correct.
Okay, any old business? Hearing none, any new business?
I have one piece of new business. So at the last meeting, I had expressed that we will be bringing some code changes this winter to more just kind of clear up some different parts of the code that are a little confusing or hard to define. One more thing that we will be bringing next month is we will be changing how the special use permits process goes. Bill and I were at a workshop last Thursday, and per Iowa code, we're supposed to be having special provisional uses go through planning and zoning for a recommendation, and then zoning board of adjustments. Currently, with our code, it says that they go through planning and zoning commission and then to city council for final approval. So at the next meeting, we'll be bringing that to correct that so that our city code is in compliance with state code. So,
Who does it go to first?
Arguing that for years.
it'll go to planning and zoning
Just the
commission
Supreme
for
Court,
recommendation.
how?
Then to zoning board of adjustment. That's per Iowa state code. Currently, our city code states that it goes to planning and zoning commission for a recommendation and then to city council for approval or denial. So,
That's a no-brainer.
State court's been that way for a long time.
that's all.
Very good.
You're just trying to
I bet
avoid.
there's more cities that do it like we do than they do the what meets the state law. I'm sure. Let's just change the state law. Just makes it more complicated.
I'll let you spearhead that one.
Could we add
There you
a couple
go.
more?
Anyway, thank you. Good discussion. Do we hear a motion to
I
adjourn?
move that we adjourn.
We are adjourned.